You're tired, but you keep smiling. Not because you're happy, but because you've trained yourself to perform survival. You've become so good at being who they expect, you don't even notice the parts of you that had to disappear to keep the peace. You've succeeded at becoming what people needed, but at the cost of forgetting who you really are. There's a version of you the world praises, the calm one, the polite one, the selfless one. And there's another version of you still waiting to breathe. The one that never got permission, the one that still burns beneath the surface. You wear the mask so well you forgot you had a face before it. We all do this, not because we're liars, but because we're scared. Scared to lose love, scared to lose belonging. Scared to show a part of ourselves that might be too real to explain, so you adapted. You dressed your rage in patience. You buried your grief under gratitude. You starved your truth just to be invited to the table. But what if the most dangerous part of you is the part you've kept silent? Carl Jung didn't ask us to fight our demons. He asked us to look at them. Because what you bury doesn't die, it festers. And what you silence doesn't vanish, it waits. He called it the shadow. Not because it's evil, but because it's everything you pushed into the dark to survive in the light. It's the desire you didn't speak, the opinion you didn't share, the anger you weren't allowed to feel, the wildness you were told to tame. It's the version of you that you had to leave behind to be good. But the truth is, you didn't bury something bad, you buried something real. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the echo of your original voice, the one that spoke before the world taught you to whisper. So let me ask you, not as a challenge, but as a path, what part of yourself did you leave behind to be accepted? Because the answer to that question is where you'll find the key to becoming who you were always meant to be. There's a fisherman in an old Japanese story. Caught in a violent storm, his boat shatters across the waves. And then it rises from the deep, a creature with the face of a monk and the presence of something ancient. But it doesn't attack, it speaks. Name the most terrifying thing you know. No weapons, no rescue. Just that question, and the man answers, trembling, my profession. And the sea goes still, not because he defeated the monster, but because he named it. That's how it works. We spend our lives trying to avoid what haunts us. We distract, perform, spiritualize, suppress, but the shadow has only one demand: name me. Because until you do, it owns you. Your monster might not have fangs. It might look like control or silence, or always being the one who's fine. It might be the part of you that wants too much. Or the one that's been angry for years and hasn't told a soul. The things you pretend don't exist are already steering your life in the dark. And if you don't confront them, they'll speak through your choices, your triggers, your patterns, your pain. Here's another story they told you wrong. Medusa, the monster who turned men to stone. But she wasn't born that way. She was punished for being violated, for being powerful, for being too visible in a world that couldn't handle her truth. So they silenced her. They made her ugly. They called her dangerous, and in doing so, they turned her into the very thing they feared. How many times have you been told your feelings were too much? How many times have you made yourself smaller so no one would be afraid of you? Every time you bite your tongue to keep the peace, every time you downplay your desire, every time you shrink to fit someone else's comfort, a piece of you turns to stone. And the worst part is you start to believe that was your choice. But it wasn't. That was survival. These myths, they weren't written to entertain. They were warnings, reflections, maps. They tell you this: the parts of you you've been taught to silence are the same parts that can set you free. But only if you name them. So I'll ask you, not as a riddle, but as a lifeline. What part of you have you been afraid to name because it would change everything? Because that name might just be the beginning of the real you. You've spent your whole life getting good at being okay. You hold it together, you show up. You keep the peace, and no one ever suspects that under the calm you are crumbling in places you don't let anyone touch. There's a man who never raises his voice, but every night he grips the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. There's a woman who's everyone's support system, but inside she wonders if anyone would love her if she stopped giving. These aren't rare stories. They're everywhere. They're us. You don't need a diagnosis to know something's been buried. You feel it in your exhaustion, in your resentment, in the way you shrink when you should be shining. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, approved, allowed. But behind that mask, a shadow grows. Not a monster, a memory, a truth. The shadow is your ambition, starved by politeness. Your desire, hidden beneath discipline. Your rage, rewritten as patience. It's every part of you that someone once called too much and you believed them. You tell yourself you're not jealous, but you flinch when someone else owns their power. You say you don't care what people think, but you rehearse every sentence before you speak. You say you're strong, but part of you wonders if you're just very good at disappearing. That's not hypocrisy, that's the body keeping a secret the soul can't ignore. The shadow speaks intention. It repeats what you refuse to hear. It shows up in the patterns you keep reliving, not because you're broken, but because something in you is begging to be seen. Psychologists call it projection. You criticize in others what you've disowned in yourself. You label their chaos reckless because you're terrified of your own wildness. You dismiss their grief as weakness because you were never allowed to feel your own. The shadow doesn't want revenge, it wants reunion. James Hillman said, the soul doesn't want to be saved, it wants to be seen. This isn't about fixing yourself, it's about remembering the parts of you were told not to love. Healing doesn't always look like peace. Sometimes it looks like rage that finally says no more. Sometimes it's grief that refuses to be minimized. Sometimes it's joy that breaks rules just by existing. And if you've ever felt hollow in a life that looks good, if you've ever asked, why do I feel like something's missing? This is your answer. What's missing is not out there. It's what you abandoned in yourself so you could be accepted by a world that never really saw you. The shadow is not your shame, it's your shape. And it's been waiting beneath your smile to come home. There's a door in all of us. You know where it is. Even if you've never walked through it, especially if you haven't. It's the feeling in your chest when someone asks, are you okay? And you smile even though your throat is full of unsaid things. It's the part of you that goes quiet at night because that's when it gets loud. You've walked past that door for years, sometimes with therapy, sometimes with spirituality, sometimes with caffeine and ambition and distraction that looks like success. But it never really goes away. One day the door screams, not with sound, but with stillness so loud it cracks your life in half. You think it's anxiety, you think it's burnout, but it's something older. It's the part of you that's tired of pretending. Opening that door doesn't look like triumph. It looks like crying in your car after a conversation that wasn't even that deep. It looks like freezing in a meeting because someone raised their voice and your nervous system still thinks you're 10 years old. It looks like hearing a song and realizing you don't recognize the person you've become. Carl Jung said, the shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door whose painful constriction no one is spared who goes down to the deep well. This is the passage, not into perfection, into truth. Because beneath every defense, beneath every mask and mechanism is not a broken person. It's a child who was asked to carry too much. A teenager who had no one safe to rage in front of. An adult who got so good at surviving they forgot how to feel. And when you finally stop negotiating with the truth, you start to hear it. I'm still here. That voice isn't your failure. It's your threshold. You thought you feared the shadow because it would destroy what you built. But what if it only wants to destroy what was never really yours? What if the breakdown is actually the release? What if you're not falling apart? What if you're finally falling back into yourself? Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's terrifying. But here's what no one told you. You're not breaking, you're breaking open. And what's waiting on the other side of that door is not a monster. It's the self you promised you'd come back for. The one who never stopped hoping you'd stop pretending. The door is still screaming, but now you're listening. And for the first time, you're not running. You thought the shadow was where your darkness lived. But what if it was where your light had been hiding all along? The part of you that loved too hard, wanted too much, burned too brightly, that wasn't your flaw. That was your flame. And the world told you to put it out, so you dimmed. You became easier to manage. You performed your way into approval. And you mistook survival for healing. But now, standing in the ashes of the roles you used to play, you can finally see what survived the fire. It wasn't the mask, it wasn't the performance. It was the voice you buried under should. It was the instinct you denied every time you called your rage inappropriate. It was the dream you abandoned when someone told you it was impractical. That's what the shadow holds, not your shame, your power, not your sin, your wholeness. You didn't fear your darkness. You feared what would happen if you ever let yourself shine without apology. Because if you did, you might lose the people who loved the edited version of you, and maybe you will. But that's the price of becoming real. Not everyone will follow you into the light when they only knew how to hold you in the dark. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming someone true. The light you couldn't bear to hold was never too bright. It was just too honest. You were told to be modest. But what they meant was obedient. You were praised for being humble. But what they meant was small. So you learned to love quietly, to hurt privately, to glow in shadows where no one could accuse you of wanting more. But you do want more. You want a life that doesn't require a script. You want relationships where your silence isn't mistaken for peace. You want work that doesn't ask you to leave your soul at the door. You want to be free. And freedom isn't found in perfection. It's found in the pieces of yourself you were told to hate. The world says be nice, and be good, be safe. But your soul says be whole. You don't need to be louder. You need to be unhidden. Because the shadow was never your prison. It was your unopened letter. A message sealed in grief. A truth too sacred to be spoken until now. You were never too much. You were just never mirrored by someone who could hold your fire without trying to extinguish it. And now finally you are holding it yourself. You're not healed because you stopped hurting. You're healed because the hurting has somewhere to go. A voice, a space, a home. You were afraid of who you'd become if you let the shadows speak. But now that it has, you're not afraid anymore. You're honest. You're whole. You're here. It doesn't happen in one moment. There's no single line you cross where everything becomes clear. Integration is quieter than that. It's not fireworks. It's a return, a remembering of what you knew before you were told who to be. The truth is you've never been broken. You've just been divided, split between the version of you that gets applause and the one you meet in silence. But now the silence has become a language. Now the ache has turned into a voice. Now the shadow isn't a threat, it's an invitation. You were never meant to choose between your light and your dark. That's a false choice. You were meant to carry both, to be a constellation, not a spotlight. To be a paradox, gentle and fierce, soft and certain, whole and becoming. You are not here to be a brand. You are not here to be liked by everyone. You are here to be known, first by yourself, then by the few who can hold what you truly are. And what you are is not the mask, not the role, not the narrative you perform to survive. You are the one who dared to turn around and walk back into the dark. You are the one who opened the door even though it screamed. You are the one who stopped running from the parts of you that scared everyone else. And because of that, you're free, not perfect, not finished, but free. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said the shadow must be faced, not fought. That the gold is hidden in the darkness, that your wholeness lives in the very place you were taught to fear. This is what it means to become who you are afraid to be. It's not about becoming dangerous. It's about becoming real. You are the voice you silenced, the fire you smothered, the truth you denied, and still you never left. Now you are no longer apologizing for the parts that don't fit. Now you are no longer waiting for permission to be whole. Now you don't need the world to agree before you let yourself be seen. The wound is still there, but now it's not a cage. It's a doorway. You have not escaped the shadow, you have integrated it. Which means you are no longer haunted, you are held. And maybe the bravest thing you'll ever do is not become someone better, but someone truer. So tell me, what part of you did this awaken? In the comments, name something you've hidden, not for attention, but as an act of reclamation, because once you name it, it no longer controls you. It belongs to you, and maybe it always has.